storms, tornadoes. It's been crazy. You know, back in 2022, anybody remember, had a property in U City that flooded? It was horrible. We've had some in Granite City. They had 9 inches of rain, flooded 1,000 properties in Granite City. Rain comes down all at once. So that was the Pontoon Beach, Granite City. We did a lot of properties in that area too from 2019. So, you know, those extreme events can happen. And they will come back again. So what about tornadoes? See, every time you turn on the weather, you hear about tornadoes in Texas, Tennessee, Arkansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, hailstorm, and a lot of hail. We've had baseball-sized hail. We've had softball-sized hail. I've even heard of a little bigger than that, orange-sized hail. This is crazy. And derecho. Has anyone heard of that word 10 years ago? Have we heard about it recently, haven't we? You know what that is? It's a straight line wind event. And they had that recently down in Texas and Houston. It went all the way from Houston all the way to the Space Coast of Florida. Straight line winds, 100 plus miles an hour. And, you know, it just levels everything in its sight. So, or it can become more and more common. Extreme cold snaps. Does anyone have a problem with water pipes bursting last January? Their home or business? We did. We had a lot of clients that had problems too. The year before, Christmas Eve, I was out working all night, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, because all these buildings and pipes were bursting everywhere. All over the city, you got down to, I think, minus 25 or 30 degrees, a wind chill factor. It was crazy. So we got more cold, okay? So water claims have increased. Some other claims are going down, but water is going up. And insurance companies are getting smarter about this. They're raising deductibles up. They're changing some of the verbiage in the policies too. Be careful with that. But average water claim was $12,500 in 2022. Who wants to write a check for $12,500 out of their pocket? How do you budget for that? You didn't plan on that when you bought that property, did you? No, it wasn't part of the spreadsheet. How much money am I going to take and how much am I going to spend? You can remodel it, fix it up. So water can be very expensive. Everything is more expensive, wouldn't you agree? Okay. So any of you have water, storm, or fire damage in any of your properties last year? Show hands. We got about 5, 6 people out there. So the other ones you didn't raise your hand, you may be raising your hand next year, or yet by the end of the year. Unfortunately, it happens. Things happen. I don't want to wish bad luck on anybody. Believe me, I've had floods in my own house several times. So I wouldn't wish it on you, but it will happen. So hopefully tonight I'll give you some tips and suggestions. So if it does happen to you, you'll know how to handle it. And you know, the damage, it has to be remediated thoroughly. You got to get on it right away. One thing I want to stress too, if you do have an issue with water damage, you want to get pictures taken right away. Isn't the tendency you come home from work and you see water all over your floors and you panic and you start getting the chop back out and you start sucking all the water up, and then you go in the next room and you think you got what you saw, but then you realize you start walking on the carpet and you realize, oh no, the carpet's wet too in the bedroom. And then you realize, oh, it got into the bedroom closet too. But you start cleaning it all up. What's going to happen when you turn the insurance claim in and you've got no proof of what was wet sometimes, because it may take a while for them to get out there. So you document, you get a phone out, take pictures, take videos, and get it all documented first thing before you touch it. If your house is on fire, of course, you don't take pictures. Get out of the house, and, you know. But if you have water damage, you can take pictures from outside, but grab what you can get out of the house. All right. And as you guys check your properties for lingering issues, one thing I would recommend, you always check your properties. Don't rely on your tenants. If you have tenants, renters, to tell you, hey, that toilet's been leaking for the last 6 months. They won't tell you about it till you go in there and they move out and you walk in there and you see what looks like mold all over the walls, all over the floors, unless they're calling you saying, hey, I'm going to the hospital, I'm sick now because your toilet's been leaking for 6 months and never bothered to tell you. Or you sent a handyman in there and they said it wasn't that bad, but they didn't send you pictures of it, or they're going to clean up with bleach. I'll talk more about why you don't want to use that. But you got to make sure you keep an eye on your properties, okay? All right, So everyone, of course, when we talk about should take mold serious, because it is a serious thing. A water damage claim, a lot of small ones we can take care of for $3,000 or $4,000, but if you leave it and don't take care of it, then you're looking at $10,000 to $20,000 to $30,000 potentially, depending on how long it sits and how bad the problem is. So no one's immune. You know, it can occur following any kind of, you know, unattended spills. People don't tell you about plumbing, or you know, misdirected lawn sprinkler too can happen. Someone left the window open, and water gets in that way. So you can read the bottom here. Mold problems with all kinds of cleanup problems and repair bills. You always wanted to make sure you document, like I said, take care of it. Water is something I don't recommend you do yourself or have a handyman do. We use special moisture meters to detect and find out where all the water is, because water is one of those things that plays hide and seek. You might see the water on the floor that you think that's all it was, but you didn't realize it went underneath the cabinets. There's drywall behind the cabinets that's going to soak up that water. It's going to get underneath the laminate flooring. Just because you soaked it up doesn't mean it's all taken care of. So we go in there with meters and inspect it for you. And if any of you guys call me and say, hey, I have a problem, and I don't know if I should turn this in the insurance company or not, call me. I don't care, 10 o'clock at night. You want to call me, and we answer our phones live 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Normally it's me on the phone. But I'll come out and look at it for you the next day and for free and tell you what the problem is and something to give you an idea of what it would cost if you decide to hire us, okay? And that way you try and do it yourself and end up with a bigger problem. All right, go ahead. So you gotta make sure you have adequate insurance coverage. This is the big one that folks that I see, a lot of people don't realize how much things cost. And when they call around to get insurance, they only ask, I'm calling to getting insurance, I'm looking for the cheapest price. Does anyone buy their insurance that way? I hope not, because if you're, you know, everything, you get what you pay for, right? Does everyone agree with me? It goes with everything you deal with out there. But insurance is one of those things you got to make sure, if they're telling you, if you had a policy, for instance, and you've had it for 20 years or whatever, 10 years, and someone comes along and says, hey, I can beat that coverage, and make sure they're giving you apples for apples coverage for what you have. Because I've had people that we get to their house and they had water damage. They said, well, I know I'm covered because I've always been covered, but they switched last year. Someone came along and said, hey, I can save you $200 a year on your insurance, but they took out the water coverage. You know, of course they're going to save money, but now they have a very expensive bill because they thought they were covered because their insurance company agent just wanted the business and didn't give them adequate coverage. So you want to really make sure you know what you've got on your policy and make sure it's more than enough. Okay, and don't save money on insurance. Water backup, sump pump riders. Anyone have crawl spaces, even a slab house should have water backup covered for like a sewer backup. If you have a basement, definitely get sewer backup coverage. We've had a lot of heavy rains in St. Louis, and this is coverage for $100 to $200 a year. It's inexpensive. But I'll tell you what, if I've had damages for $10,000 to $20,000 in people's homes and businesses, and they didn't have that rider, they didn't know they didn't even have it. So make sure you look at your policies. If you call me 6 months and say, hey, we got a problem and we're good, but well, you're not. So just review it, make sure you have it. And also, I'll tell you one thing real quick about backup, people don't realize, and they always say the wrong thing when they call the insurance company. Who knows that when you call, everything they tell you, that you hear this recording, your call is being recorded for quality assurance purposes. Is that really for quality assurance purposes? No. That's to get you to say the wrong thing. And they have a recording of it. So I always tell people, before you call the insurance company, you call me, and I'll help you walk through the process. Tell me everything, facts of what happened, what you found, and what steps you've taken, and just make sure that call to the insurance company is accurate and correct. Because you can't go back and make another call back to them. People will call and say, tell them my basement flooded. And they say, well, where did the water come from? I don't know. It may have come in from seepage around the house. You think that's covered or not? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. or it came into the window well. Anyone have a property that had window water come to the window well? You get an 8-inch rain, water will come to the window well. If you have a window well in your basement, it will get in there. Okay, that's not covered. But what if you have a sump pump that's in the basement, and you had sump pump coverage, but you forgot to mention that sump pump quit working because the power went out, and that's why the water was coming in around the foundation. Now it's a covered loss. Okay, so I've had to go back and try to get the claim covered now, going from no coverage to $10,000 worth of coverage or more. So I can't stress enough, it's critical. Call me first. Don't feel like you have to call them right off the bat. Let's make sure we understand what you've got. I'll look at your deck page with you and make sure you understand what coverage you have, so you make sure you ask the right questions and make sure you're gonna be covered, okay? All right, and also it covers you for sudden water damage. Don't call them and say, hey, this thing's been leaking for 3 weeks and I just got around to getting it fixed and now I'm gonna turn a claim in. That will not be covered either. It's called a maintenance issue. So, but if you come home from vacation after being gone for 3 weeks, you walk in the front door and you notice it smells like water damage and mold and the water's pouring out the toilet, been running since you left vacation 3 weeks ago, that is a covered loss, okay? All right, so that would be covered. Even if it's been running for 3 weeks, you didn't know about it. You just came home and found it. All right, go ahead, Amber. Okay, so a leak is usually covered, like I said, but the long-term leaks that have been neglected are not covered. So don't tell somebody it's been leaking for a long time. That is not covered. If your tenant didn't tell you it's been leaking for a long time, but you just went over and did an inspection or picked up the rent, and you walked in the door and you smelled something musty or doesn't smell quite right, and they tell you, well, it's been leaking for a long time, but they didn't tell you about it. Well, you just discovered it then. You didn't know it's been leaking, so not your neglect, it's your tenant's neglect for not telling you. Still should be covered, okay? So pay your insurance, protect your building, don't be afraid to file a claim when it's necessary. So if you file a claim, you want to find all the damage that was caused. A lot of people, like I said, do it themselves. A lot of do-it-yourselfers, that's great for some things. Water damage is not something I'd recommend being a do-it-yourselfer. The amount of the claim doesn't normally affect your insurance costs. So everybody know that your rates can go up whether you have a claim or not? Does anyone know the rates have gone up even though they didn't submit claims? It does, right? Because you know what? If you're in 63104 zip code and there was a big storm there last month or 6 months ago and everybody filed a claim, but you said, you know what? I'm lucky. I didn't have a claim. Everyone else flooded, but I didn't. You know, guess what? They're going to make that premium up somewhere. So they're going to raise your rate. So don't be afraid to turn a claim in. It's legitimate. And if it's enough, you know, you got your deductibles, of course, but, you know, get an estimate what it's going to cost. And also, an adjuster will only look for the obvious damage. That's why when you call and you want someone, the adjuster comes out, they're not going to be doing any digging and looking around and see if there's water underneath your floor, or they'll go up in the attic and see if there's any damage. If you don't report it and tell them it's damaged, they're not going to go looking for it. So again, you want a company like myself to be there with you to walk through it and make sure everything is pointed out to them, so nothing gets missed. All right. So if you have a water event, of course, look for all the damages. Things should be cleaned up quickly, minimize damage. This is the front of the wall, and like I said, hide and seek. How about water that was behind the wall? The front of the wall looks fine, but we have meters to tell if there's a problem, and that you don't want that in your property there. What's behind that wall there? Be a problem. All right. So water can hide, of course, behind walls. And anyone seen a thermal imaging camera or heard of them? Okay, this is a jellyfish problem. Yeah, it kind of looks like it, doesn't it? This is a property actually I was staying at one time as a rental property, Airbnb, and I thought I was smelling some water damage and mold in the property, and put my camera out, and lo and behold, found it had a roof leak. And you can't tell by looking at the picture on the left there's any kind of water damage. So as I said, water can hide. It's very critical, and you can't just go by putting your hand on the wall and say, well, it feels dry. I don't feel any moisture in there. Must be okay. It's not, obviously. the blue you see and the purple, that's taking the temperature readings. At 70.2 is what the blue is. The other surfaces are 74.7. So it'll take the temperature reading. Water is gonna be cooler than dry. So when the things are wet, it'll be cooler and you'll be able to see it through the thermal imaging camera. You can pick them up for a couple $100 online. It's a good investment to have, to buy them. You know, just do a Google search for the small thermal imaging cameras. I would recommend having it if you have property, because it'll give you an easy way to look at something if you had a storm or some kind of an event to tell if you might have some problems. Okay. So again, this bathroom, it looks pretty good, it looks okay, because the toilet's missing, but a lot of times we'll have a toilet leak. People think, well, we just took care of the toilet, we got the floor taken care of, but what about that vanity? A lot of times they'll say, well, this vanity's got a little bit of water damage on the bottom of it, it's okay, it'll be fine. But, and let's see the camera there showing the moisture that's on the vanity. Go to the next one. Isn't Amber doing a great job? Thank you. All right, so again, you see the drywall's wet here, and back behind the drywall and the flooring, you can see all the water damage there that was hiding. So you gotta look for, there's obvious damage and there's also unobvious damage that's hidden. That's why you want us. Untreated water damage, of course, can cause serious damage to your building and then your tenants. That's why you have to be careful, okay? So how do you know if you have water damage? Well, of course, you might see any mold on the drywall. That would be obvious. See water standing on the floor. That's another obvious reason. But then you may notice a musty smell. So when you walk into a home, your property, if you're looking at buying something, and you walk in, the first thing that smacks you in the nose is a musty smell, like you smell it just in grandma's basement. It's been damp for many years. You know that smell. So that's what you want to look for, that when you smell that, there's something hidden in that property. You may not see it obvious, but there's some moisture problem somewhere. You might look for stains on the ceiling, cracks or separation around the wood and around the window trims. Is another good indication there may be water damage could be coming in from around the windows. Or baseboards, the water damage on the floor in the basement. All right? So what should you do? You got large areas. You gotta call in a professional. So we recommend indoor air specialist or industrial hygienist to come in. They can do testing for you to determine if it's safe to breathe. Has any of you had tenants that they call you and say that they're getting sick and they want you to come take care of it and they've got mold problems? Anyone had that problem yet? We get calls all the time from tenants, all the time. I always tell them to go back to the landlord and talk to them. I won't go out and look at the property for a tenant unless the landlord is there with me and wants me out there to look at it. So we won't go out, but I get calls all the time. So, you know, I don't know how you want to handle that, but if you do call me out there, I'll come out and with you, and I'll only talk to you and tell you what I think and what should be done. But I've been on the end of court cases. I've been called as an expert witness. Landlords have been sued. And even if you win, you lose because of the fees you got to pay for attorneys to fight it. It can be a really ugly situation. So I would take mold very seriously if you got a tenant, you know, that's saying there's problems with water, to get it handled right. All right, go ahead. So do-it-yourselfers, hard surfaces. You can use a good commercial cleaning product. You know, you don't want to. Always dry the surface afterward. You don't want to spray something on it, like in a closet, let's say, and get a big bottle of big pump-up sprayer, and you're just got to soak it down with water and get it nice and wet. Okay, I think that'll take care of the mold. The more water, the better. The more cleaning solution you put on, the better. And then you close the door up. And but guess what? Your problem just got bigger because all that moisture is going to be in that area. So you got to make sure you get it dry. And I did not recommend using bleach. I'll tell you why. So dangerous for children and pets, highly toxic. It remains on the surface. And actually, mold is actually what I call mold food. It's mostly water, bleach, unless you bought it when it came off the factory production. But if it's sitting on the shelf in the store, you know how long it's been sitting there? It actually it basically loses its power the longer it sits there. It could be there for 6 months when you bought it, and it's basically most of water. May have a little bit of bleach in it, but bleach does not work. It makes it mold look white, or it makes it invisible, but it's still there, okay? And there's also a lot of studies about children being exposed to it, plus you got animals. So there's a product that we use, it's called HOCl, which stands for hypochlorous acid. It's electrolytes water and salt. And if you want more information about where to get it, let me know. But it's a very safe, it's used in our human bodies, it's used by our white blood cells, produce it to fight off infection and disease. But it's very good against mold, and it's safe. You can put it around anybody. If you got asthma, you can breathe it. My wife has asthma, I know. I use it around her all the time, and no issues. So if you want more information about that, let me know. That's a great product to use. And it's safe. Okay. What about asbestos? So asbestos been around for many, many years, hasn't it? So if you guys do your own renovations, or you guys hire, friends, contractors to do the work on it, does anybody test before doing renovations? You don't have to admit, EPA is not here, no one's gonna take you away, so you don't have to raise your hands on this, but it's something very important I want to talk about, because it's something I've seen people lose properties over. And because you can get by with it for many, many years, and never can happen, nothing can happen, but all it takes is once. Somebody comes around and finds somebody doing some work, and they ripping things out, nobody tested it. Ignorance is not a good excuse. You can't say I didn't know. They don't care. EPA can fine you, and the fines are $10,000 or more. And then they'll be on your tail anytime you're doing work on a property. But it can be found in many of these things, from vinyl flooring, patching compounds, paints, acoustical ceilings, tiles, pipe insulation. It's everywhere. It was used throughout, started around 1930, I believe. So, and you know what? You can actually go to some stores and still buy products that have asbestos material in it today. Yes. It's not produced in the United States, but products that are imported in from other countries do sometimes contain asbestos. So you really should test everything. There's a company called EMSL here in St. Louis. You can do your own sampling if you like. Just take a little piece of the flooring. If you're taking a vinyl tile, before you take it up, take it and get it tested. And you can get a little sampling to see what, and they'll run the test on. They'll run a test on not only the tile itself, but also on the mastic. So make sure you get the mastic up too. And if there's multiple layers, sometimes you'll see in these properties, they put layer on top of layer on top of layer. They didn't want to mess with it. So make sure you get all the layers when you're testing it. And I see a lot of it in vinyl flooring. And insulation, roofing, if you do any roofing, pipe insulation. If you walk down into older homes, you'll see it wrapped around these pipes. So, and you may or may not have to take it up. You can just cover it up. But if you have water damage and it's wet, and it's sitting on a wood subfloor, you have to deal with it. You can't just leave it, because then you end up with a mold problem. So, but there's good news about asbestos. That something came out in May, all right? Talk more about that. So, true or false question. Can I have my workers remove suspected materials as long as they are following proper methods? Anybody want to guess on that? You got two options. What do you think? True or false? I hear false. All right. Anybody think true? No trues? Question is, true or false? I can have my workers remove suspected asbestos materials as long as they are following the proper methods. Okay. So we'll go to the next one. It depends. It always depends, doesn't it? There's a little caveat here. Okay. So you're right. Now it depends. What does it depend on? Well, it depends on how much asbestos there is. 160 square feet. If you have a kitchen, 150 square feet or 160 square feet or less, and that's the only asbestos that you found, yes, your workers can do that. Okay, take it up, as long as they're following safe methods, of course, keeping it wet and doing that work. If you find her 260 linear feet or 35 cubic feet, that can be done by yourself or by your employees, okay? Now, of course, your employees should be aware that they're messing with asbestos. They should be proper mask and gloves and make sure they're not eating the stuff or anything too, not sampling it, so. But that was as of May 7th, 2024, so that was something new. It used to be all had to be done by, so that's something new I wanted to help educate you about. So, but I do not recommend, tackling a lot of asbestos. You gotta get some companies out there. There's a company called Crossroads Services. His name is Tom. If you look up or write down Crossroads Services, if you need a lot of asbestos work done, abatement done, he's very fair and reasonable. I'd recommend reaching out to him. I don't do it ourselves. We call him and let him handle it. Okay? Takes the liability off of you. All right, mold control. The key is moisture, fix leaky plumbing, leads from inside the building as soon as possible. And also watch for any condensation, wet spots. With air conditioning, a lot of people like to turn the air conditioning on. Now, it's not a good idea if you're going to be leaving your home for some time, or you got tenants that are going out of town and they want to turn the air off. It's actually very humid in that home, and that can cause a mold explosion as well. And you want to reduce any moisture you have in indoor air. Increase your ventilation. And anyone have any of these this is called an AccuRite. It's a little moisture humidity reader. You can pick these up at Home Depot or Lowe's or Menards, and it's good to have this in your basement. Keep it in any areas on your properties and keep an eye on your moisture. Anybody know what your relative humidity should be kept under in your home? Much less than 60. About 40, correct, Amber? Yeah, 40%. So that way you kind of keep an eye on it. So if you get around 60% over a longer period of time, you will start getting mold growing everywhere. So you want to keep your humidity under control. If you have a wet basement, probably with a wet basement, keep a dehumidifier in there. Keep a meter, or keep one of these little gauges with you to know where you're at on your humidity levels and make sure you're keeping it down, okay? This one is an AccuRite. It is it's a humidity and moisture, a humidity and temperature reader, okay? They have a little battery on it, and they run forever. So you can get these I've seen them at Lowe's or Home Depot. This brand is AccuRite, but you want one that tells temperature and humidity. And it'll tell you if the indoor humidity is one that says 47% in here, which says is okay. That's still, it's closer to 40 than 60. But it will tell you, what the low was and what the high was and the indoor temperature readings too. Okay? And they're about $20, $30 for those readers. All right? And then, so do-yourselfers, items made of fabric can be cleaned. So if you got clothing, can be cleaned sometimes, depending on if it's just a little surface mold that from humidity, that could be cleaned or wiped down. But if it's really porous surfaces, check regularly, see if mold has returned, infiltrate those. If mold can find to reappear, you want to dispose of those items. You don't want to keep cleaning them if mold keeps coming back. Okay. One thing I forgot to mention here, I'm almost at the end here, but look around your properties and you see these cracks here? Can you guys see these? So look around your properties. You're buying it or investing in a property or one you own currently. Make sure you don't have some major issues here where wind-driven rain, if you get a strong storm, they can blow in moisture around your windows, your doors. Make sure you keep it freshly caulked. And you want to use a good elastomeric caulk. Okay? Elastomeric caulk. Okay, on your properties, and make sure you don't have any kind of gaps like that. Water will get in and find a way. And again, that's not a covered loss, water coming in from lack of maintenance, okay? All right, Amber? Also, heating, air conditioning, ventilation, drip fans. We do a lot of water damage from people who have attics, furnaces in their air conditioning units in their attic. The condensation lines do get clogged. So you want to make sure you check those condensation lines, make sure they don't have dirt and debris building up. Because when it does back up, then that pan will start filling up, that's up there in that space, and guess what? Someone's gonna call you and say, hey, we got water leaking through the ceiling, and they may not be home when it happens at first, and maybe several days before anybody notices. So you want to get that taken care of. You know, of course, get them inspected by your local HVAC guy. And also make sure your building foundations, you want to make sure you have gutters, good downspouts. Water flows away from your property. I've been at many properties that I've seen the downspouts weren't hooked up. The water was dumping right alongside the house, right along the foundation, and going right directly in the crawl space. And it's a simple hose. You can get extender hose, rubber or plastic to hook on that gutter, make sure on the downspout, make sure the water's flowing away, so when you get heavy rain, you're not gonna have any water accumulating. Also, do a walk around your outside of your house and make sure if you're next to the foundation here, that this is not lower than over here, because all the water is going to run toward your foundation again. You want to build that up and have it slope away. If you got people above your property that are pumping their water down toward you, that's even more critical, because you're not dealing with just your water, you're dealing with their water too that's coming toward your place. So you want to get that gutters, downspouts, everything directed away from the foundation. All right, go ahead. So, can anybody see this, what this cartoon does? I'm gonna read it for you. For those in the back, you may not be able to see it. So this is, this guy comes out here, there's the homeowner, and this is the insurance company on the briefcase. And so the homeowners are saying, is that microscope to check for mold? And it says, no, it's to read the fine print in your policy. So that is true. As I said, go back to the policy thing for a minute, but that's very accurate. I see that happen way too many times. There's a lot of fine print. So when you think twice about signing a contract with your insurance company, preferred service provider, again, they kind of go back to the accident issue I told you about. When somebody rears you and you think it may be a good idea, hey, this person behind me may know a good chiropractor, they may have a good auto body guy. But when you call the insurance company and you said, I want you to send it your service provider to my home or my property, guess what you're doing? You turned over all control and power to your insurance company. Is that a good idea? No, who are they looking out for at that point? Themselves, correct. Even though I see these commercials on TV, they say, you're in good hands with Allstate. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there, right? That's not always that's what you see on TV, that's what they want you to think, but that's not reality, okay? So you can decide who you want to work on that property, okay? You have full control over that, so don't let them tell you, hey, if you have XYZ come in here, I can't tell you we're gonna pay the bill. That's not true. They use scare tactics. Don't let them scare you. Okay? All right. So again, you decide who works in your home or property. You own the property, right? And your insurance policy doesn't say, I need 3 estimates before you can do any work. That's not true either. You need to find somebody you trust and you like, who's got good credentials, is going to take care of you. That's what you need. All right? So you may want to think twice, of course. Well, we already covered that one, so go ahead. So we have the experience technology to find hidden water. We come out and we do a mapping of the whole property. We take pictures and document everything for you. So we handle it to make sure everything is recorded for the insurance company so they can properly pay the bill, which is very critical. We don't want you to be stuck with anything out of pocket any more than you have to be, because that's your deductible. And again, this is what we can do for you. Water damage, mold, fire, or we've got 5 fire jobs we're doing right now for property owners. Remodeling, we also do reconstruction too. One thing I forgot to mention, I wanted to tell you guys about this, a real secret that a lot of you don't realize. So how many of you have renters that rent from you? A lot of you? Okay. Do you require them to have their own renter's insurance? Yes. Yes, everybody? Has anyone thought it's not a good idea, or it's not my problem? Hey, if they want their stuff to get ruined, that's on them. Anybody think about that? What, sir? And you look at it to make sure what they have? That's great, that's wonderful. You guys are a smart group. Also, make sure you can be listed, as an additional interest on that policy as well. So if they show you they got insurance today, they move in tomorrow, but what happens, they don't pay that premium the next month it comes around, they said, you know what, I'm not gonna pay it, right? Yes, sir?
My tenant canceled it 3 times, and when I kept pulling them up, she got your insurance, they didn't know I was getting notice every time it canceled.
Right, no, exactly, that's smart. Here's another way you could do it too. You can have the insurance company doesn't care who makes the premium payment. So let's say if your rent is $1,000 a month rent for that property. Now it's $1,025 a month. You make the premium payment. As long as they sign the policy over, they sign the application agreement, you can actually make that premium payment and make sure it gets paid. So that way they don't have a problem canceling. The other thing I've seen with properties too, that if tenants always careful with your property, they treat it like their own, right? 100%, right? Not exactly. So we've had a lot of issues with tenants that have fires. They have fires happen in the kitchen. They let their 8-year-old decide to cook chicken wings on the burner. Heat up a big old pot of oil on the stove. Mom's in the room, or dad, or whoever, is in the other room watching TV, and 8-year-old's in there cooking chicken wings with a big old pot of grease on the stove. And they throw these cold frozen wings in there. And before you know it, you got the kitchen's on fire, and they panic and they throw water on it. That's a good idea, right? Nope. Then you went from a small fire to raging fire. So is that tenant liable? Yes, they are liable. Do you know tenants also carry, or every policy does cover what's called liability insurance? You guys know that too? You can go after them for your deductible and your out-of-pocket expenses. What about your other tenants that you're having to relocate now because this person was not responsible with your property and they did something that was neglectful? They can help offset some of that expenses. So that's why renter's insurance is so critical and so much you want to have it. You're not paying for it unless you pay for it and then increase the rent, but whatever. But you want to make sure they have it. Don't ever say, we don't require it, or we don't care if you get it or not, because it's so important to make sure you get that rent payment. Because they got insurance, you're still going to get paid your rent, even though they're not living there now. They're going to get a new place to live. They got renter's insurance. But make sure it's enough money in there. I've seen people with $10,000 of coverage, and that's it. They paid like $10 or $20 a year or something. That's not nothing. So make sure they have enough to pay for them to move out. You can get renter's insurance for $150 a year. That's decent coverage, okay? All right. Sound like a plan? I hope you guys learned something tonight. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
We'll go back to the sub-fund.
Yes.
If you have dehumidifiers in the basement,
Yes.
and it takes a month to get 1 cup of water, would that be a gauge as to needs similar to your humidity reader?
I would get a humidity reader and put it down there. Yeah, so he wants to know, he has a dehumidifier down in his basement. He's only getting about a cup of water out. You said, what, about a month? Okay, so 1 cup a month. That's not a lot of moisture in there. So every basement varies on how much humidity and moisture you have down in that basement. But you may not have to run that, but if we go through a wet period of time, then it may increase. You may get a lot more moisture out of that. Depends on the basement. If it's an older home or a newer home, some of them will have more moisture, but I would get one of these little readers, keep it down there and see where you're at. You may not have to run it all the time, but it just depends on, and the other thing too, if it's an older dehumidifier, it may not be working very well. A lot of the newer ones do have a setting on it that you can change. You can set it to 40–50% humidity, where when it gets down to that level, it'll kick on automatically. So it's an older DU, it may not have that technology. So a lot of the older ones just may not keep up. So it depends on your dehumidifier you have in your basement, but it's good to have one down there just to keep humidity under control. Yes. Any other questions? And my number, you guys have my phone number, business cards. I'm gonna have a stack of them over here. I know you got another great presentation coming up. And I've got some giveaways I'm giving away. Just awful disclosure that my wife and I own another business called Adventures of Intrigue. It's like an escape room. It's a whole lot of fun for families, couples, bringing your kids, grandkids, nieces and nephews. It's over near Soulard by Johnny Brock's. But if you guys give us your business cards in this little bag here, or write on a piece of paper with your name, phone number, and email, we're gonna do some drawings for two different passes of 2 for Adventures of Intrigue for you guys to come and check it out and have fun. Okay? So we have everybody put something in that wanted to put something in for this? Okay, there's some. Okay. We're brand new, we just started 2 months ago. This is really a dream of ours, that we want to get back to the community and get people together and get kids off their phones and spending more family time together. So it's pretty cool. And I talked to Tyrone. We have a nonprofit, so we also work with a lot of nonprofit agencies to help raise money. So if you have a nonprofit, let me know. All right, so we're going to get a few more people together. We can do the drawing. Again, thanks for letting me come out tonight to speak with you. Hope I gave you some good education, information. Okay, so you have a blue ticket. Everyone got a blue ticket in? Okay, blue tickets. All right. All right, here we go. Gotta make sure everybody's got a chance. So it is a $70 value for this per person or per thing. And you can just let me know when whoever wins, I'll get your information, reach out to you, and then I'll give you a gift card, and you can pick when you want to go and who you want to take with you. Okay? But we have 12 different adventures to choose from there. We have things for kids as young as 4 years old, all the way up to 104. So it was a lot of fun. And we're fully accessible for anybody in a wheelchair, crutches, they're all flat, there's no steps whatsoever. It's all fun. Nothing like anywhere in St. Louis, so hope you guys get to come at some point and see the Adventures of Intrigue. All right, here we go. Here's a blue. Did you get one, sir? Here, yeah, this gentleman's got one right there. Let's get a chance. All right. If you don't win, you're still welcome to come see us. We're open Tuesdays to Saturday. I've got some cards, brochures I'll leave. I got some over on the table, little rack cards about that place, so you can make sure you grab one. All right. All right, so here we go. For the first 2-pack, gift card is 3641682. All right, there we go. All right, congratulations. What's your name? Charles. All right, congratulations, Charles. Charles with the cash has got. All right, cool. All right. Actually drew 2 of them out, so I'm going to do 2 more drawings. All right, instead of just 2 total, I'll do 3. All right. So the next one is 3641654. Who's got 364? There we go in the back. What's your name? Derek. All right, congratulations, Derek. All right, 2 tickets to Adventures of Intrigue. You need to choose what adventure you want. There's like 12 different ones to choose from. You can choose when you want to come. It takes about an hour, but we don't kick you out if you don't get it done in an hour. We give you time to finish it too. All right, next one. The last one, 3641650. All right, is that Steve? All right, congratulations, Steve. All right, sir, that's cool. And you got my number, information. Don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions at all. I don't charge for advice. Okay? All right? Thank you.
All right, I certainly learned a lot. I hope you all were taking notes. What was that device called, a hydrometer?
This one is a humidity and temperature reader. Use one in the store, box stores, find them online too. You take humidity and temperature readings.
Nice.
Okay?
All right, so for our next presenter, have you ever had to evict a tenant? Okay, just told you all I got my property back Monday. Do you have a problem tenant now? What do you do? Are you a DIY, or would you prefer to have the number one real estate attorney working for you? Many of you personally know our guest speaker this month from attending our virtual Friday networking sessions at 11 a.m. With Katharyn Davis. She joins us the first Friday each month for the Ask the Attorney. In fact, she helped us pioneer our Friday events with the weekly updates during COVID. Are you prepared for challenges coming up for your landlords after July 1st? Tenants will be entitled to free legal representation paid for by your state dollars, while you have to pay for their evictions. Kathy will be taking time out of her jam-packed schedule to share the latest proceedings that are going on behind the scenes. She has also set aside a little time for Q&A to answer your specific real estate questions. You'll be blown away by Kathy as she has to say this month. Not only is she filled with legislative facts, she is also so entertaining and highly educational. You will learn, laugh, and avoid costly mistakes. And if you think this may not apply to you, think again. A good tenant can turn on you in a second. Know what to do before you have a problem. Insider knowledge is always best. The best investment you'll ever make is in yourself. Invest a little of your time now and potentially prevent thousands of lost dollars and headache later. So let's put our hands together for Miss Katharyn Davis. Please, for this go around, we'll do the questions at the end.
Just ask, just raise your hands if you want anything. How are y'all doing? So at the beginning of the pandemic, John reached out to me and said, oh, we're gonna try this phone thing. And I can remember Chris and Christine and I were all in our conference room on my cell phone, handing it around. So I think half the time our heads were upside down and trying to keep everybody going during the pandemic, trying to keep us going, because since about 1985, when I was 5 years old, and I started practicing law, I've been in court pretty much every business day of my life. And when the pandemics shut the courts down, I mean, all my friends are bailiffs. I have no social life if I can't go to court. It was tough. It was tough for all of us. And then that was a shutdown by the Missouri Supreme Court, the part that shut the courts down. I know that our legislature recently passed a law against eviction moratoriums in the courts, but the legislature can't be over the courts. We have the three branches of government, right? And in Missouri, that's the legislature, the courts, and the governor. So that's not really going to stop the courts from ever shutting down again if the Missouri Supremes feel like they need to. The good news about that is we figured out Zoom and WebEx, and we still do a certain amount of court remote now. So I don't think it will stop again like it did where it just stopped dead for 2 months and it was horrible. And then, we have different characteristics of different counties around the state and right here. In the county of St. Louis, you might remember, am I bringing back bad memories? You might remember that our presiding judge at the time, Judge Burton, sweetheart of a guy, and apparently, very affectionate towards tenants, because he stopped evictions for a year. he felt that even once we were back in court, first we did court, on Zoom, and then we got back in court, he felt even after that, even after we started having vaccines and, what have you, he felt that he could not let the fragile blossoms in the sheriff's department go out and evict people. Now, I don't know if you've met any sheriffs, but they are pretty hardy guys. And they were upset that they couldn't go out and do their jobs. And really, when we do an eviction, how many people have set someone out in St. Louis City or county? Gone all the way to court, gotten the judgment, put them out. Okay, so what we do now is the sheriff sets the date, you meet the deputy there, you have the ability to change the locks, or you have a locksmith with you. The deputy walks quickly through the dwelling, removes any people, supposedly inspects for contraband like drugs and guns, and you change the locks and the place is yours. Then we have the whole drama about what you do with their stuff. But this wasn't a long exposure to a possibly COVID carrying tenant. This was, it's a brief in and out. In the city, we got a little luckier because we had a good presiding judge there too, Judge Burleson, and he stopped all evictions at the beginning, but every month I would have a call with him and I would kind of negotiate, like a later curfew, right? It was like, I'm a teenager. How about 11 o'clock this week, Dad? And how about unlawful detainers this week? How about commercial evictions? How about if you let us start doing 441s? And we got to the point by the end of the first summer where we were pretty much back to normal in the city, except we were still doing all our dockets on WebEx, which was pretty horrifying. But, WebEx and Zoom court was fun because you had this, Hollywood Squares or Brady Bunch full of faces on the Zoom call, and the judge is trying to keep order, but he can't have the bailiff throw them out because they're on TV. The judges mostly figured out as they went along that they could mute people, but people were doing anything on these calls. People were yelling at their kids, they were drinking, they were smoking, they were in the bathroom, they were in various states of undress, and that was just the lawyers. Then there was the tenants. People driving. That driving thing really seemed to bother judges. I think they didn't want anyone to have a car accident in their courtroom. They would yell at people driving. But fortunately, we're pretty much past that now. We've gotten some good out of it because sometimes I can get the permission of the court to have a witness appear remotely. So if I have a client who is out of town and has property here, they can sometimes be approved to appear remotely so they don't have to fly in for an eviction hearing or that kind of thing. And we do a lot of motions where there's just attorneys remote. I always prefer for the judge to see my smiling face in person, but the remote stuff works sometimes. It's hard for me sometimes because I'm supposed to be in 3 different courtrooms and one's remote and the other 2 are in person, and I really don't want to run back and forth to my office. But in some of the courthouses, I know where there's a friendly computer that I can use and appear on my remote and then go to my in-person. So let's talk a little bit about what's changed since the pandemic. One of the big things that happened during the pandemic, in addition to being stopped from doing our work for a while, are you gonna make it so I don't kick that anymore? Thank you. One of the big things that happened during the pandemic was rent relief. Did anybody take relief money? It's okay. You can say that you did that. I mean, I got a PPP loan. Me and my people couldn't go to court. We weren't making a lot of money for a while there. And I wanted to keep all my folks getting their paychecks, getting their health insurance, and that kind of thing. I didn't want anything to happen to Chris or Christine or Heather or Carrie or Letitia. I wanted everybody to be able to go on. So no shame to me if you as landlords participated in one of the various rental relief programs. The problems were that the tenants wouldn't apply until the day before court, or I'm leaving court today and I'm going to go apply for it. Well, that was not helpful. The county rollout, St. Louis County's rollout of the SAFER money was horrible, just horrible. They paid $3 million to some internet company in California to set the website up, and it was really months before it was running smoothly. It was awful. I hear that there is still some rental relief money out there. Apparently there's some in Kansas City. But I think the downside of the rental relief money is that a lot of tenants think they can still get that. And we see people that are being referred to us for eviction that have $20,000 or $30,000 in prior rental relief money that they've gotten that was paid for them. And now they've run up months more of rent. And they think they're gonna get rental relief money again. It's not necessarily there. We are pretty much back to 211, United Way, St. Patrick's Center, St. Vincent de Paul, the Urban League, those kind of things. But getting through the pandemic changed a lot of things with respect to the way the courts view tenants. Missouri law is pretty pro-landlord. A landlord-tenant action under statute has to happen pretty quickly here. And there's not a lot of defenses. If you haven't paid the rent, you're probably gonna either pay the rent or you're gonna get evicted. However, judges have gotten, in many cases, more tender-hearted towards the tenants, or at least more cognizant of giving tenants information about how they can get help. And this works in a couple of ways. One is referring them, and a lot of courtrooms have flyers or things posted on the backs of the benches or things on the bailiff's table that can be given to a tenant that give them resources where they can get rental assistance. I don't really care about that so much. The other thing that they have is often a list of the places that do representation of tenants at no cost to them. Have any of you seen those in court? They'll list like legal services, Art City Defenders, New Covenant. They used to list EHOC, but apparently EHOC's, some of EHOC's people were maybe doing something funny with the books, so they seem to be out of business at this point. They're also maybe from time to time a referral service through the Bar Association to get pro bono attorneys. And then the big one that Amber referred to in that very nice introduction is the tenant right to counsel in the city of St. Louis. And I can tell you where they're getting this from, at least within our state. They're getting it from Kansas City. Kansas City has tenant right to counsel. What this means, of course, anybody has the right to get an attorney if they pay them. You can have me, you have the right to have me if you pay me. But that's the problem for the tenants is they need a free lawyer quite often. And in Kansas City, they have tenant right to counsel. And every Monday, they open the phones for the tenants at a certain time in the morning. And they only take like the first 10 or 12 cases. So the city of St. Louis, which is kind of being run by socialists now, as far as I can tell, decided to pass tenant right to counsel here. And they have $5 million in old pandemic relief money. Personally, as a city resident, I think they should have a functioning 911 system, a reliable water supply, trash service, and a fully staffed police department before we get onto these extras and frills. But okay, they allocated $5 million for this. And we kind of laughed when we heard that. We're like, $5 million a year? No, it's $5 million over 4 years. That does not buy you a lot of lawyers. Have any of you done your own eviction in the city? Gone to Division 28 or 27 on a Friday where they have pro se landlord day? Well, that's just a small drop in the bucket. We have evictions every day of the week in 2 courtrooms in the city. I mean, there's hundreds, if not thousands of people a week getting evicted in the city or having a case brought against them. $5 million is not going to represent all those people. So first of all, before you panic about right to counsel in the city, they have to be picked, and they're probably going to do it. The only pro bono legal agency that's willing to do it is Legal Services. And the city is still fighting with Legal Services about how they're going to do it. Because Legal Services, the city has said, we want you to represent all the tenants that are being evicted. And Legal Services has said, you're insane. We cannot represent that many people. We'd have to hire 100 lawyers, and so we're only going to do a few a week. So they're still talking about that. By the way, those of you who have been following this may know that that's supposed to go into effect July 1st. And the ordinance mandates that the landlord or their attorney give a notice to the tenant being evicted of how they can contact the right to counsel representation. Well, they're not going to be in place by July 1st. Watch your website for your group, because as soon as it gets in place, I will email that notice to John so that you guys can download it and furnish it to your tenants that you're gonna be evicting in the city. And I think it's gonna be a very small percentage of tenants who will actually get the right to counsel. First of all, half the tenants are ghosting us as soon as they quit paying the rent. They're never gonna come to court, you're never gonna hear from them again, they're not gonna return your calls, and at some point during the process, you're gonna find. If you are doing your own evictions in the city of St. Louis, and the tenant gets a lawyer, and they could do that now even before right to counsel, because they could go to Legal Services, Art City, New Covenant, or whatever, and do it. You probably do not wanna represent yourself. At that point, you wanna reach out to an attorney. And there's several of us who do this, who do good jobs. I'm the best, but there's several of us who do this. Am I right, Herman? Yeah. There's several of us who do this, and for those of us who do a lot of it, we do it on a volume basis. It's not that expensive. So it's not gonna be like a fancy house payment. It's not gonna be that bad to hire us. Or at least call me and let me talk to you about it. And let me tell you what one of the big pitfalls is if you're representing yourself. If you're using the forms in the courthouse given out to people who are unrepresented, what we call pro se, to file an eviction, those forms are not compliant with the law. So the court is gonna tell you, here's the form that you use. You're gonna fill out that form, all well-behaved and innocent, file it, and a legal aid attorney is gonna come along and say, ha, you filled out the form wrong and that form is defective and I'm gonna move to dismiss your whole case. Chris was in court this morning on one like that, where the person started out representing themselves, they got a legal services attorney, and they just didn't have, the form just doesn't have the right boxes. Because it used to be, back in the day, when we filed a regular rent and possession, regular eviction, we could only sue for rent, possession, and court costs. Then in the early 90s, they did a massive overhaul to the rent and possession statute, and they said now we can ask for rent, possession, court costs, and other fees like attorney's fees, late charges, bad check charges, provided there's a lease and they're provided in the lease. We can still not ask for physical damages. However, part of that statute says you can only proceed to evict the person, to physically put them out for rent and court costs, not for the other things. So the logical extension of that is that you have to itemize those things so that the court can tell how much is rent, and they know how much is court costs, and how much is other stuff, so they can decide whether or not they can award an eviction or not. Are you guys following me on this? Am I explaining it good? You got me? Everybody good? Okay. They also now require, because of a change in the Missouri court rules, that you attach to your lawsuit, any kind of lawsuit, any document that you're relying on in that lawsuit. What is your document in a rent and possession? It's your lease, right? So you're gonna have to attach your lease when you file the lawsuit, and you're gonna have to have a copy of that lease attached to the lawsuit when it's sent out to be served or posted on the tenant. A lot of people don't know this. I can tell you a lot of lawyers don't know this, and they're not doing it. We, of course, are doing it because we are perfect, but in fact, when we saw all this coming and we knew that the court forms were not right and it was gonna be a long process to get the courts to change them, we have our own form now. And I'm happy to share that with anyone, who wants to call my office, I'll send it to you. We have our own form for the evictions and we have our own form for the judgments, because the same thing is true on the judgment. When you go into court, there's gonna be a big table with forms on it, or shelves, those kind of shelves where you can put documents in, and there's gonna be a form for a judgment and a rent and possession, and it is not compliant with the law. In St. Louis County, they want you to file a second piece of paper in addition to the judgment that does all the itemizations, but they don't tell you that. And it's kind of hidden on the table, and it's not a triplicate form like the judgment is, and you're probably not gonna notice it. A lot of attorneys don't. So our judgment form itemizes everything that we're taking the judgment for: the rent, the late fees, the attorney's fees. We have one category that we call utility and other, and I think someday somebody might make us break that out, but we're just going with it now because we're so far ahead of everybody else that we're not getting yelled at by the judges yet. And we itemize that all out, come to a total, add the court costs, and that is our judgment. And that's what you really have to have. Probably a lot of the times you'll get away with not doing it, but if an attorney enters on the other side, they're gonna see that right away, and they're gonna go after you. They're gonna try to do a motion to dismiss and just get your whole case kicked, and then you've lost that court cost, you've lost the time, and you have to start fresh, and the court still doesn't have the right kind of form to help you file it. So, what's the message here? Call Kathy if you need these forms. Hire Kathy really is what you should do, but if you don't wanna hire me, I understand, I'm a little hard, but it's okay. But get the forms from us. Or go to the court and yell at them, not really yell at them, that's probably not a bad idea, but go to the court and say, look, why can't we have the right form? Because we know that we need to have these itemizations, and see what they say. What's my phone number? 314-962-1115. And some of you may know my partner, Christine Travellini. You should ask for her if you have a county eviction, because she does St. Louis County. That is such a busy docket for us that's what Christine does. She does exclusively St. Louis County docket. Chris Bosler, some of you may have met Bonnie, my daughter who used to work for me. Now she has a good job. But Bonnie's husband, Chris Bosler, does my city docket and Jefferson and St. Charles. If you're not sure, you can ask for me. We're all a little hard to catch up with because we're in court a lot. You can also ask for Heather, our paralegal, who is wonderful and who will direct you to the right person or help you with the form or that kind of thing if you need it. Yeah, just tell them, say, I need to get Kathy's firm to evict somebody and my property's in the city. Yeah. And be patient, sometimes we're in court a lot. But we will get back to you. Or email us. And I left big cards up front, along with my sharks. I hope everybody got a shark. Yeah, the sharks. And they list everybody's, I think, direct lines and I hope emails, because sometimes it's a lot easier for us to go back and forth with you by email. When I'm in court, I can't make a call, but I can sit in the jury box discreetly and email people. They both will yell at regular people on their phones, but they'll let us get away with it. Right, Herman? Herman and I were doing that yesterday in Judge Hearn's division in St. Louis County, playing with our phones. Where's Roger? Roger doesn't like to go to court anymore, he told me. Yeah. So sad, Roger. So, we know right to counsel is coming in the city at some point. It's going to be underfunded. It might not be well run. Don't panic about it. But if you are doing your own evictions and an attorney does enter on the other side, think carefully about calling one of us to help you. Also, probably a lot of you know this rule already, but if you are an entity, if you're owning your property or you're a management company in the name of an entity, you have to have a lawyer represent that entity. Now, that rule is sort of in my favor, right? Because it's saying, if it's Roger Wallach LLC and he's not a lawyer, he has to hire me to do his evictions. He would anyway, but I also think that the statute says it can be the owner of the property or an agent. An agency is a very loose category. So if you hire someone to manage your property and your property's in an LLC and you hire someone to manage it, an individual, I think they can represent that LLC and sue for rent and possession. I will tell you that a lot of people disagree with me, and I do better with that argument in outstate Missouri than I do here in the big city. But I do argue against my own interests with respect to that sometimes. I am on the Supreme Court Committee, Missouri Supreme Court Committee. I need to quit answering my phone when they call. And we are studying associate civil justice reform. And this is part of the post-pandemic effort to make the courts more friendly and happy for people who don't pay their bills. For unrepresented litigants, is what I'm supposed to say. And these people, we are outnumbered. It's very sad. There's only 3 of us who do creditor side, and there's like 8 attorneys on this committee who represent people who don't pay, unrepresented litigants, all over the state, and some of them are from Kansas City, and that's where all this right to counsel and everything stuff started. And it's the Wild West there. They're getting judges to continue cases for months and do all kinds of horrifying things. So we are fighting this. We're just like Churchill. We're fighting on the beaches, we're fighting on the shores, we're fighting it everywhere. And we're on this committee trying to hold the line so that the rules don't get changed to make it unfair to you. Okay? Does anybody have any questions, or you want to shoot out a topic you want me to talk about? That's my big update about right to counsel. Anybody got anything? Do I think right to counsel is coming to St. Louis County? No, I don't. I think Sam Page and the county council cannot agree on anything. I don't think we have the kind of extreme left-wing progressives in the county that we do in the city. Did you hear about the bill where they wanted, I live in the city, right? The bill where they wanted to let homeless people camp in your yard and you weren't gonna be able to, get rid of them? Did you see that article in the paper where Beavis Shock sued on behalf of the poor people that own the property, and the homeless people have been in a tent with tarps on their sidewalk for 3 years? And, okay, imagine those tarps and that tent and those homeless people on a corner in Clayton. How long? How long do you think? I think the over-under is 5 minutes. Not happening in the county, that kind of thing. And I think that the right to counsel, I don't think the county has the money. The city really doesn't either, because they lost the earning tax lawsuit and they've got some other problems, but they've got this little bit of pandemic money they want to spend on this. I don't think it's a good priority. And I also think that if they wanted to give $5 million to help tenants, they should just make more rental relief. Because if you don't pay your rent, you're gonna get evicted. I don't care if you have lawyers. We have lawyers on opposite side of our cases all the time, and if the people don't pay the rent, they're gonna get evicted. And if it's an unlawful detainer where it's the end of the lease, or we terminated them for cause, we're careful about those, we have our ducks in a row, they're gonna get evicted. So, I don't care how many lawyers you have, bring it. Actually, sometimes it's easier when there's a lawyer if the tenant is extremely crazy. And often the lawyers are more frustrated with their tenant clients than we are even. They might do better off hiring social workers for some of these people, because a lawyer can't help that. Yeah. Do I always represent the investor, or do I represent tenants too? Almost always the investor. Hardly ever a residential tenant, occasionally a commercial tenant. And I'm pretty much the only person in my firm that will do that. To represent a residential tenant, it has to be a favor for a friend kind of thing. I don't do that kind of business as my living. But, if someone that I know that I'm close to, or their child is having a problem, or, that kind of thing, I might help them. We don't do it a lot because we do so much representation of landlords and investors and property owners that it just becomes a conflict. So, yeah, that's pretty hard to watch ever. Did you have a question?
I did. It was switching gears away from
Yeah, that's okay.
the EOI report. Are you familiar with that?
With the what?
The EOI, the beneficial owners.
Oh, is this that new thing we have to file with the feds?
I was going to ask, is it in January of 25? That has to be done by?
I think it has to be done by December 31st, at the end of this year, for existing corporations. And Roger, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't it have to be done within like 60 days if you're forming a new one? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the feds, I think this is through FINRA, am I right? The feds have made a requirement that all entities, partnerships, LLCs, Incs., any other entity where you're using a fake name other than your name, has to file this report with the federal government that lists all the beneficial owners of that entity, their percentage, their socials, some other stuff. Herman, do you know more about it?
I felt a judge down in Florida declared it unconstitutional.
Well, I think he did not stay it for everyone. I think he just the stay is limited to just that case. So we're kind of keeping an eye on that to see if that changes. But right now, I would say technically you still have to file it. We have, I guess, until the end of the year to figure out if an appellate court is gonna take it up and stay it for the whole country or not. But the situation right now is you're gonna have to file it.
Yeah, I mean, it's any entity that gets a document recorded with the state. So, which like an LLC, C corporation, trust with a BIN, it's a state filed entity. It's like a land trust, it doesn't apply to. As you know, when you have a land trust, as a beneficiary, you're an LLC. So LLC is the one that has to file all that, disclosure stuff.
Could everyone hear that response? Okay, the information is any entity that has to file paperwork with the Secretary of State of Missouri is gonna have to file this if you're a registered entity. And I actually think it might be a little broader than that, but I'm not sure.
Wasn't this originally introduced as for the troublesome Airbnb industry? Isn't that how that snuck in?
I don't think it was to do, the question is, was this introduced because of Airbnbs? I don't think it had to do with Airbnbs. We were discussing this before our meeting started tonight. And I think I read that this was supposedly a fighting terrorism. And someone else said they thought it was fighting drug dealers. But the key connection there seems to be money laundering. And I just don't think they're gonna get that far with this. And I don't think it's that hard if they suspect someone to look into their corporations and figure it out. It's kind of, without having this extra piece of paperwork filed, it's kind of like the, plus if you're a criminal, aren't you gonna file it falsely anyway? I mean, you're already a criminal. Why are you gonna start telling the truth on that paper? Right, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's just kind of like, the city of St. Louis is saying, we're gonna stop, anybody that's not within 20 miles of the city of St. Louis from owning any property and renting it out in the city of St. Louis because we don't know who they are. Well, first of all, you're on a deed. Secondly, if it's an LLC or corporation, the Missouri Secretary of State has the paperwork that says who the people are behind it. It's not that hard, and they just want to make it more onerous for landlords. And let me tell you about another group that I'm in, because I'm just, I guess, kind of a masochist in all these groups trying to fight this craziness. The realtors in the apartment association started a group called the Housing Solutions Coalition when the city started getting really crazy with some of these bills they were going to pass. And we have met a number of times, and we have a lobbyist, Maureen O'Donnell, who's very good, and we have had aldermen come to meet with us, and someone who works for Megan Green, and we have gotten them to moderate some of their positions, and we're saving you some aggravation. It's hard to crow about a success when the success is getting them not to do something, but we have been successful. We got the whole thing with the registration enlarged, so it's like within a 100-mile radius of your property rather than like within 20 miles, whatever they wanted. We got the whole mold thing just stopped once we pointed out that scientifically there are a lot of different kinds of mold. A lot of mold, as you know, is due to tenants for housekeeping, and they wanted to have all these penalties if you had mold if the tenant had mold in their units. Well, that's not even going to be your fault. A lot of mold is harmless. There's like hundreds of thousands of kinds of mold. So they realized that they were not, going to be able to be successful with that. We got the air conditioning one modified. Did you hear about that? They wanted to make it so that everybody would have, 65 degrees in their whole unit. Now it's just between 65 and 80 in one room is the minimum requirement. Now, most of us know that when the air conditioning goes out, it's because the tenant didn't pay Amaranth. And that's what really happens. But so we've gotten some of these crazy propositions moderated. And the whole, letting the homeless encamp everywhere, I think, is also dead in the water. Not necessarily because of this coalition, but because everybody in my neighborhood, the Central West End, said, wait a minute, what? and they decided they needed to back off from that one. What else we got? Yes?
Yeah, I got a tenant that,
I have, some tenants that were supposed to be out by the end of, last month. They're still living in the place. They keep on saying they're gonna move out, so the lease is over with. Yes, I can file eviction, but short of that, they're in the process of moving out. Would you send a letter, or what would you do short of an eviction?
Well, first of all, their lease is over May 31st,
Yes,
and they don't have a new lease.
no,
So first, don't accept June rent,
yes.
because that creates a new tenancy, right? We all know that. Secondly, when you say they're in the process of moving out, is that them telling you that, or are they actually like packing and?
Yeah, they're packing, yeah, and they're moving some stuff already, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, that's a hard one, because, you know, my belief is that everybody lies to us.
Mhm.
And, you know, I go to court and negotiate with these tenants all morning. And even if they're very nice, and I'm nice to them, you know, I'm professional, I'm nice to them. But I'm just assuming they're all lying to me,
Mhm.
you know? And sometimes it's more obvious than others, but, I mean, I would be looking at things like packing and if they're actually moving stuff out, that kind of thing. We would send a letter
Mhm.
if you wanted us to. I don't know that that would impress someone like that. Have you thought about asking them, but we could try that.
Mhm.
We charge about $150 to do that.
Yeah.
Have you thought about asking them for their new address?
Not yet, but I will.
And maybe confirm with the new landlord?
Mhm. Well, she's moved in with her boyfriend, so that's the new landlord.
Oh, that's the new landlord?
So I don't think, well, but then I can use a thing that, hey, if you want to have your security deposit back, you know, I got nowhere to send the money.
Well, and it sounds like if she hasn't paid rent for June, and it is the 18th
Yeah.
today, she's using up that deposit pretty quickly.
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you know any idea what condition she's gonna leave the place in?
No, not good.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah.
What we have done, tell her we'll give her $500 cash once she has everything out of there and the place is clean. And
Cash for keys.
that goes a long way.
Sometimes that works. Sometimes, you know, you don't wanna give them the cash before you have the keys.
When they're out the door and everything's clean.
Right.
I'd like to say something else too. Fortunately, I've only had 2 evictions. You handled it, Christine Travellini handled them, and they went very well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Christine is very good, very tenacious, very aggressive. We've had all this stuff with the pandemic. We've had a lot of turnover with our judges in St. Louis County. It's been a very difficult few years, and she does amazing. I mean, it's just really incredible how she just sticks in there. She's got our new judge. We have a new judge we really like. Christine has her cell phone already and calls her about stuff. I mean, she's on top of it. It's very good.
I actually have a question, and then I'm gonna hit you, and I think John has a question as well.
Okay.
You were talking today about itemizing, so I got my property back Monday through the sheriff. I have a property manager. We went in and there's just, I mean, it's not trash, but she left a bunch of stuff. Can I send that information to my property manager and get that added into the judgment?
Okay, the judgment that you already took to do the eviction with the sheriff, that's done. But you could sue again for property damage. So first you wanna take pictures.
Okay.
You wanna itemize and keep receipts for any costs that you have. You know, sadly, a lot of what we see is we get the eviction judgment and we don't even have a way to collect that judgment, let alone file another lawsuit, track the person down for breach of lease and ask for the damages and, you know, that kind of thing. So sometimes it's not worth it.
Well, you gave me some numbers to hunt her down and collect.
Okay.
And then I just realized, so I was getting a ghost bill from the water department, and she has about a $1,200 bill that's still on there. So I called them because it was weird. At the bottom it now had my name on it. So I said, hey, what's going on? You know, this is a rental property. And they basically said, because I'm considered the parent on the account and she was the child, if you will, the bill stays with the house. I had never heard of that. So I'm curious, I assume I need to add that on there as well.
Yes, you should. And don't forget to send your itemization and apply the deposit within 30 days for
Okay.
state law. If you don't have our new address, send it to your property, and who knows what the post office will do this,
Yeah.
these days. But they're supposed to forward it, but you gotta do that, or they can sue you for double, which is completely unfair, but they could. So you
Okay.
gotta do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Kathy. So grounds for eviction, what are they?
Okay,
Talk about
so
one.
the basic one, 90% of our evictions are rent and possession, which means they owe rent. Rent and possession is pretty easy to do in Missouri. You have to have a landlord-tenant relationship, the rent has to be unpaid. I mean, if the rent's due on the first, we can sue on the second. I don't necessarily recommend that, but you could. And you have to have made demand for the rent. The lawsuit counts as a demand, but we do recommend that you ask for the rent first before you send it to us, see what they're gonna say, or if they're gonna respond, or, whatever. And then you file the rent and possession lawsuit, you'll get a court date in 3 or 4 weeks, and if they don't pay the rent that's due as of the day of court, you can get a judgment. If they don't pay it still, after 10 days, generally the judgment's final, and we can file for the sheriff to meet you out there and get them out. So that's like 90%. Then there are the unlawful detainers. Unlawful detainers are evictions for cause, or at the end of a tenancy, or after a foreclosure, if you're the purchaser of the foreclosure. If you have, just as the situation we just discussed, the end of the lease, don't accept rent for the next month if you want that person gone. And an unlawful detainer, if the lease ends May 31st, an unlawful detainer can be filed June 1st. The unlawful detainer allows us to collect double rent and double damages. Not physical damages to the property, it's kind of amorphous what they mean by double damages, but you can definitely get double rent. If you want to terminate them for cause, we have to have what's called a material breach of the lease. So it can't be just, I don't like the way he looks, it has to be something significant that they're doing that we can terminate. And we will evaluate the reason why you want to terminate and decide whether we can do a full month termination or a 10-day termination. And then there's the big hammer that's rarely used, kind of the nuclear weapon of evictions, what we call the 441s, for chapter 441 of the Missouri statutes. This generally requires a crime. We will not file 441s unless you have called the police and gotten a police report. This is for like shootings, drugs. We had one where they were manufacturing fentanyl in a 4-family and there were children living in the other units. Just horrifying things. It's a really fast eviction. I mean, the court date's in like 10 days and the sheriff will go out immediately if we win. So there are some lawyers, particularly during the pandemic, who got a little loosey about filing these 441s, and they started losing them, and they made it hard for the rest of us. So we're careful. We have good grounds before we file 441. There's one other kind of eviction that's a little more obscure. It's the ejectment. Ejectment is what you have to do after a sheriff's sale. If somebody forecloses on a property and then flips it to you, and you weren't the purchaser at foreclosure, you have to do an ejectment. And the kind of ejectment that I seem to get is kind of the family divorce ejectment, which is where mom has the drug addict kid living with her, mom dies, the rest of the siblings are done with this sibling, and they want them out, but there's no landlord-tenant relationship, and so an ejectment has to be done to get them out. And a lot of times they want to get them out, sell the property, divide up the estate, that kind of thing, but the one kid is a ne'er-do-well. Or the parent dies and they had a boyfriend or girlfriend living with them, and that person doesn't want to move. Those are ejectment situations. I do a fair amount of them, but hardly anybody else does them. And they're harder because they're circuit court, they're a little more expensive, they take longer.
Could you speak on consent judgments in regards to what we're talking about here?
Well, about half the time in court, the tenant will show up. And if they show up, we try to negotiate a consent judgment with them. Sometimes, based on what we know about the schedule of our judge and when we think we can get a trial setting, we might give them a little bit more than the traditional 10 days just to get them signed to a consent judgment. But the consent judgment is going to be they're going to agree to move or pay within X number of days. Sometimes our clients will give us instructions to do a more elaborate consent judgment that says, if you pay $500 every month on the 15th, plus your regular rent and charges when due until it's all paid off, there's a stay of execution. And that can be a good way to enforce a payment plan, because if they miss any payment, even if it's 6 months down the road, we can have the sheriff put them out.
As a private lender, I need somebody that will review both my deed of trust and promissory note. Is that something you would do?
Yes,
Perfect,
and we also do foreclosures.
perfect. Love that.
Hi Kathy.
Hi.
These are probably more questions on the side of what could be in a lease, is that okay to ask?
Yep.
Or- Okay, so, I understand that there could be a maximum of 2 months security deposit in Missouri?
Per statute, yeah. The exception is you can charge more for a pet deposit.
Okay, well, that was the second part of my question.
Okay.
So let's say 2 months rent equals $2,000.
Right.
1 month, 2 months. The pet deposit then could be an extra $300 on top of the 2,000?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Okay, and it can be a deposit, not a fee. It
yes,
can be classified as a deposit.
yes.
Okay, and then second question, if a tenant is asking for a radon test, like they've been living there and they just randomly are asking for one, how is that best handled? Should we do it and then remediate it? Is there any liability that would then come back if it is positive for radon?
Is there a reason why they're asking?
She asks things all the time. Like she's constantly, there's always something. It could be that, who knows? She's like the worst tenant ever. She's just hard.
So then when that lease is up, don't renew it.
Can you say that louder so my husband can hear that?
When
He's
that
on
lease,
Zoom.
when that lease is up, don't renew it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hear that, Heath?
One thing when we're talking about leases, make sure that your attorney's fees clause, which you must have if you want to be my friend, you must remember the attorneys, make sure that it is not prevailing parties, make sure it's just for you. That the landlord is entitled to collect attorney's fees and costs of collection for any actions brought under the lease. Not prevailing parties, which is, they get the free lawyer and they're gonna threaten to sue you for some BS counterclaim, but you're running the risk that, if it goes against you, then all of a sudden you're owing their attorney's fees too, which are gonna grow to be a lot more than mine are, I can tell you that. And another thing that you want in a lease is a jury trial waiver. Put it towards the end of the lease, put it in bigger font, bold it, make them initial it, but a jury trial is waived for any action under this lease or this tenancy.
Do you guys review leases? If we sent you our lease and
Yes.
say, maybe add these things, that would be something you
Yes.
guys should do? Great.
Yeah.
And you provide a lease as well, or standard, I've seen that.
Yeah, I think Chris has it on his computer.
Yep, Chris has sent me.
Yeah.
I did have an online question about squatters' rights. Can
Oh,
you talk
yeah.
about that a little?
Squatters is really interesting, because I don't think the governor has signed this yet, but what? Okay, there's a bill. It was passed by the legislature, and the person could have signed it, I don't know. I haven't seen anything saying that it's signed yet, but we expect them to sign it. And it is giving a way to get rid of squatters that's very similar to a domestic violence order of protection. It's a real fast, streamlined way to do it. I will caution you that it has penalties if they're not really squatters. So this is not gonna be a substitute for a regular eviction of a real tenant, okay? But fingers crossed, it'll get passed, and I will know by the first Friday in August that it's passed, and if it's passed, it will go into effect August 28th, and I will talk about that on our monthly call, okay? Because the governor has until like the second week of July to sign it, and we think he's gonna. The lobbyists that I talked to and everything thought it would happen.
Why isn't he signing it too?
Well, it won't, whenever he signs it, it won't go into effect until August 28th. I think he's busy sitting other things like appointing judges that we need badly, but, no, I don't know, he probably has a lot of legislation to sign. Actually, maybe he doesn't, because I've heard the legislature was completely dysfunctional this year, but, they did get this one thing done, and we're happy about it, and I like the way it reads. And, fingers crossed it'll get signed and, become law. I think this month and a half that the governor has to sign stuff is just part of the process. And because it won't go into effect until August 28th anyway, yeah. Anybody else? Roger?
Yeah. I know I said I'm looking to not go to court, but I'm still going to court, including on one weird one. Have you, ever had one where the tenant was trying to invoke that double my security deposit because you didn't have a walkthrough in 30 days?
Yes.
And, I researched this, it was a little harder than I expected, but I have some thoughts on it, but I just wanted to, for this audience, just to make sure that that's an important thing to do and.
Well, you are supposed to do a walkthrough with the tenant. What we recommend is that you send a letter, when their lease is ending, telling them, when the walkthrough is. If you've evicted them, you still have to offer them this. If you don't know where they are, send it to the property address. Maybe you'll pick up a forwarding address that way. But just be able to show that you sent it. I feel like most of the time the tenants ghost you on the walkthrough, but if they wanna come and do it, fine. We tell them in court to ask the landlord for the walkthrough. Then you have the rest of the 30 days after they've vacated to itemize the disposition of their security deposit and send it to them. Or, the law was recently changed. It used to be that the court could award them up to double, and now it's shall award them double. So they're taking away twice the security deposit if they win these. They typically file them in small claims court.
When did the shall change over effectively?
3 years ago, maybe?
Okay, it does say shall.
I lost all sense of time during the pandemic.
Well,
I don't know
yeah.
when it happened, but recently.
Yeah, I thought it.
Maybe longer ago than I'm thinking, but yeah.
Because, I mean, the only cases I could find under it, actually, it still said may. So.
Yeah, it definitely says shall now. I think it's 535-300.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
The other thing, because someone asked about animals, I thought about this too. There's this thing where I had my first client who has a tenant who has a,
Emotional support.
the emotional support dog.
That is the biggest scam.
Yeah, and, I looked into it, I hadn't had a reason to before. It looks like you can't even take an extra deposit for it, and you can't even,
Yeah, it's not considered a pet. That's all exactly true. However.
And you can't charge for it.
However, it has to be, well, with an emotional support animal, it's not the same as the.
Well, there's two
service
things,
animal.
right, there's ones that, animals that physically help you, disabled, but there's also just emotional support, but I think this thing reads, it doesn't matter for this purpose.
Well, I can tell you that because I won this, they still have to, like, pick up after the pet and not let it poop all over the place, and it can't be bad and that kind of thing. And I had a eviction I was doing where EHOP got on the other side and asked for a jury trial, because my poor tenant did not have a jury trial waiver and release. And this mother and daughter tenant were driving this 4-family building crazy. And the attorney for MEHOC was not a thorough person. And so in the middle of the jury trial, I was able to produce video evidence that not only was there this one emotional support animal, so to speak, that was pooping all over the front yard, but there were 3 other animals that were also pooping in the front yard that were all living in this unit. And we had on video, this is like a big Perry Mason moment, right? The daughter breaking into the mailboxes in the common lobby of the building. The jury all just kind of went, and yes, I got my verdict, thank you very much. Somebody didn't do discovery.
Yeah, I guess not.
Yeah.
So, but it sure looks like you have to, the only thing you can do, it does say you can expressly ask for proof of, I don't know if it's called a prescription or whatever it is, somebody who has.
It's some certificate they printed
some
off
kind of
the
something
internet.
that says you have to have, that you have.
It's some certificate they printed off the internet. It's so bogus, it's such a
Okay.
scam. I had heard some rumor that the feds were gonna review that, but I don't know if that's happening. Yeah.
But meanwhile, it looks like I couldn't advise them to, the only thing I could say is that, of course, your regular deposit certainly can cover all damages, including
Correct.
damages made by
Right.
that animal. That part's clear.
That is
That's-
true, yeah.
That's all there is really that I could see, okay.
Okay, let me do one thing on CaseNet real quick. CaseNet opened to regular people on July 1st of last year, by which I mean, rather than just seeing like the docket entries, you can now see documents and everything. And a problem that has arisen with respect to this is that we are responsible for redacting anything that we file on CaseNet that gives private or personal information. And this includes things like names and ages of children that are listed as additional occupants on the lease, social security numbers, that kind of thing. We're good at checking for that, but we're not perfect, and we don't want to get in trouble and file something that has information that should be redacted. So if you could, going forward, don't put socials on the lease. You put 3 children, but don't put their names and ages. If you want to put those things in there as part of the agreement, do it as an addendum, so I don't have to file that when I'm filing the main lease with my lawsuit. Do that and help me out, guys, okay? Okay. Who else has? How late is it? Do you guys want to go home? Okay.
Hi Kathy, I have 2 questions. We have a property manager and these are past, well, one is past. But just to raise it.
They're dead?
They're past situations.
Oh, okay.
But just to raise a question for hopefully it's not the future, but as an education.
Okay.
First question, we had a tenant, a lady, she was the only one on the lease. Her boyfriend visited, I don't know how often he was there. It turned into a domestic violence issue.
Yeah.
Where he kicked in the door, damages. I think the property manager did ask her to leave. I think that's like all the sensitive subject in the law, but there was damage. So that's where there was a violation to the lease. I don't know if you can expand upon that.
Yeah, the domestic violence stuff, there are special laws for that. First of all, they have a right to break the lease if they are being stalked or pursued and for their safety. I think you have the right to see that they've filed for an order of protection or that kind of thing, but they can break their lease if they can say that there's domestic violence. They have to pay any charges up until they leave, but you can't hold them to the rest of the lease. The reverse of that is you cannot evict someone because they are a victim of domestic violence. Okay, so you can't make her move because of that. She didn't do that damage. It might be, what do you think, Herman? It might be a little shaky to charge that to her. Did you make a police report? I would make a police report, certainly.
They are responsible for their visitors or guests in a way.
Yeah, the twist here is that it's a domestic violence situation and there are extra protections.
I had a similar, I'm losing my voice, but I had a similar, situation like that, where the tenant that was living there, her boyfriend, he kicked the door in.
They like to kick the door in tonight, right?
When he kicked the door in, he was, some kind of way they arrested him immediately, and so they contacted me. And when they contacted me, they had him held in jail. So what I did is type the form up real quick, and I typed it making sure that he was responsible for my door before they would release him.
That's a good plan.
So that's what I did. I took the form to the jail, had him to sign it, and pay for the door. And that's how he got released.
That's a good suggestion. But yeah, I think the main message here is that domestic violence victims have extra protections under the lease. And I'll try to remember to look that up if you want to call me and find out if you can charge the damage to the tenant. I'm thinking maybe not, but.
And then the second question, have you heard of resident benefit packages?
No. Should I be very afraid?
Okay, so we did change property managers recently in the city. When we interviewed property managers, pretty much everyone is offering the resident benefit package. The minimum price is $30 up to $45 a month on top of the lease. And so what it includes is renter's insurance, we talked about renter's insurance, a concierge service when tenants are moving in to help set up utilities. It may include furnace filters, which we, having a multifamily complex, we don't want our tenants touching the furnaces. So we don't like that part of the lease. And there's about 10 other items. Some property managers require this. Few make it mandatory, but they still require renter's insurance. So here's my question. If the property manager is requiring it and it's an extra $45 a month and the tenant gets behind on rent, so now they also have late fees and the property manager collects some of the money, can they take their fee first for the benefit package versus the late fees, which we're supposed to get 50%?
I would have to look at your property management agreement, but I will tell you something, if I were hiring a property management company and they said, well, we have to offer this, I would say, no, you don't. You know, you don't. And maybe that should not be the property management company that you pick. And I'll tell you something else, there's a lawsuit that has started right now in several states with respect to this RealPage. Have you heard about that? RealPage is, I don't know if it's in Missouri yet, but it's used in some states, and it's where it's used by big companies, I think, at least initially, and they're getting sued by the Department of Justice because RealPage allows the property management companies to like log in and find out what everybody else is charging and show their charges and that kind of thing, and that's antitrust. So for your property management company to be saying we have to do this all the same for everybody, I think is like saying they're not allowing competition in the marketplace. You know, like this owner doesn't have to be the same as that owner. You can decide, I'm gonna make my rent a little higher because I wanna get better tenants, or I'm gonna offer this package because I think the tenants will like it, or I'm not gonna offer it. But email me your agreement with the property management company and I'll tell you whether they can charge you that, how they can charge it. If they drafted the agreement, I bet they can charge it off the top.
So back to my little pet peeve that she was talking about on the resident package. My personal thing is that I feel that the property managers should not be marketing our tenants and affecting their income stream when we allow them in 3 times the rent or whatever the rent is. And then all of a sudden the property manager can make this a mandatory accessorized thing and tie it in with our lease.
Put that in your property management agreement, they can't do that. They're working for you.
That's what I thought. That's how I look at it. That we hire the property manager to collect our rents, not to market our tenants. And not only that, you're not giving the tenants the option to either seek their own as a consumer, a comparable coverage or similar.
Right.
You're making it a mandatory using our buildings and our properties and our space to market their package.
Well, I think that should be negotiated in your property management agreement with this entity. I don't wanna throw property management companies under the bus, because I represent a lot of them, but it strikes me that some things in this scenario might be worthy of a report to the real estate board.
See, we agree with that too.
Yeah.
We also feel that if we're providing insurance coverage on our properties against our mortgages or, the property itself, that if they want something like that, they should be having us named as additionally insured on those individual tenant policies. And it should be separate from our lease. Our rents are priority, they're first. That marketing, you sign with the tenants and make it optional for them to seek shopping elsewhere before making it mandatory.
I agree with that.
All right, thank you. Eric Mason Jr. too.
So I had a tenant, kind of reverse domestic thing. They were both on the lease, but they weren't married, so they were fiance, husband, or boy, male and female, gonna be get married. So they both sign the lease, they move in, and guess what? They break up.
I've seen this movie too.
And so, I don't remember the exact details, because it's like 2 years ago, but they want to kick each other out, right? Because they broke up. And they're both saying, well, we're on the lease, so we have the right to be there. So they wanted me, the crux was, he wanted me to change the locks on the house so she couldn't get in. And I'm like, well, she's on the lease, so I have to provide a key to the unit. Any advice on that?
Well, if they
I mean,
go,
well, let me rephrase it. Any advice on future rental agreements that might be able to handle that better?
well, they're generally both jointly and severally liable on the lease. And if they're both parties to the lease, you are liable to both of them to provide the premises and that kind of thing. So you can't lock one out. The only situation where that is an exception is where there's a domestic violence order. Then you might be able to do it, but you need to see that order.
I just told him, I don't know what to do. Leave me out of it. I think that's what you told me, right?
Yeah.
Just, no, I did actually, because, you know, I'm an engineer and I'm trying to figure it out. What can I, yeah, and so that's why I listened to you. So I just told him, well, you know, somebody better get their rent to me, and I don't care who it is, okay? And I'm not changing the locks because that costs money. I put locks in and they still work. You know,
Right.
if you want to hide the key from her, that's your problem, you
Yeah.
know?
And they can sue each other in small claims court if they're interfering with each other's tenancies, but you have to still be the landlord to both of them. Okay, guys, so my son and my granddaughter are here from out of town, and then Bonnie and Chris's two little children, and the out-of-town grandchild and I are gonna go to the pool tomorrow morning so that I can stuff them full of sugar and give them back. So it's been great, thank you so much. And I'll see you on our first Friday Zooms, except not July, because it's right the day after 4th of July. Okay, but by August, I should know about the right to counsel and about this water bill. Okay? Thank you.
Hey, I think Kathy has one more announcement real quick. If you're interested in a handout on the landlord and tenant remedies, Kathy has some handouts.